Oh, really?
We are recording. Jump straight into it. Oh, hi, Anna. Oh, I'll just mute you. Grand. All right, let's kick off. So, welcome everyone. Obviously, my name is Michael, and this is the first of a series of webinars more focused on the information and records end of things for ARANZ. Obviously, to anyone in RIMPA Global, we have a reciprocal member relationship there. So you're of course welcome, and everyone else in the community, because you know, we don't exist just to look after our members. We exist to improve the state of things in New Zealand, Aotearoa. So today we're here to talk about SharePoint. I just wanted to say very quickly that our emphasis here is on a kind of very introductory perspective on thinking about SharePoint and Microsoft 365 and how you can manage information in it. There are many rabbit holes we can go down in terms of details on any of these points, but for today it's about sort of an overview. We are recording, so we will go fast through many things, to be honest, but know that there's a recording, and hopefully the outcome of this is that you can identify things that you want to follow up on in your organization, like, oh, I need to find out some more about that thing. So we thought it was simplest to kick off the webinar with two members of council presenting so that we didn't have to go and find someone else to do that. Irina is an absolute legend in terms of her deep knowledge of Microsoft 365, looking at it from a technical perspective, but coming from that information management angle. I've done plenty. I won't say that much more about me, but both of us are on council. Irina is membership secretary, and I'm the vice president. And yeah, we both work a lot with Microsoft 365, and we come from an information management perspective. So that's why we're here doing this today.
And before we proceed to our session, would like to remind you about our membership benefits. So all our members are getting regular newsletters. They get our annual publication artifacts. They also get discounts to paid ARANZ events. Today is free, but we sometimes do run paid training sessions. We've got discounts for some open polytechnic courses if you're planning to do some further studies. And in fact, a couple of courses are available for free. And also, we have an arrangement with RIMPA, so any ARANZ member, anybody who joins ARANZ, will get the same global memberships as all other RIMPA members get. And honestly, with the cost of RIMPA training courses and RIMPA things, if you do a couple of courses there, it will pay your ARANZ membership fees. And of course, our membership gives you access to our professional community and gives our concerns a much stronger voice. One little change we've done literally a few weeks ago is that membership now is for 12 months from the time when you join. So if you join today, if you're not a member, your membership will last till 27th of March next year. In the past, it was more tied to the membership years, which was from the 1st of July till 30th of June. But we listened to your feedback and we changed the way we are doing our membership years. And that's all about membership. You can see the link in the slides where you can go to our website to join ARANZ if you are not our member yet. And now let's get to our session on SharePoint. So today we will give you a quick overview of SharePoint in Microsoft 365, key features and components, and we will also dive a bit in other parts of Microsoft 365 like Microsoft Purview, which is important for information governance and records management tools. Then we will talk about key differences between Microsoft 365 and our standard EDRMS that we are all used to. And we will give you some useful resources to explore after this session. We will have some time for questions and answers at the end of the session, and we will share the slides and the recording afterwards. So, SharePoint. So what is SharePoint? SharePoint is a cloud-based system that is available to us, and lots of you are probably already using it for content. That's where you store content in terms of, it could be intranet content, it could be document management content. If you are using Teams at work for collaborating with others, well, all the documents and all the content you share in Teams will be stored in SharePoint as well. Now, let's have a look at the key concepts, key components of SharePoint. And some of this terminology might be a bit new to you, so that's why I just wanted to introduce our session with these key concepts. So first of all, in SharePoint, we have concepts of sites and libraries. So if you imagine your SharePoint is like a big house, so think about the sites as like different sections or areas in your house where you can keep and manage your content. So they're like different rooms in your house. So each room is its own site. You can put different locks in different rooms to allow different people access to different rooms, so that one person can access room 1 but can't access room 2. And another concept that is important to remember is libraries. In our rooms at home, we have bookshelves, right? We don't just chuck papers and books on the floor. We put them on the shelves. The same in SharePoint. Once you get your room, which is your site, then you need to get your bookshelf to put your documents onto. And this is called libraries. So libraries are like bookshelves in your room. And you can have multiple libraries or multiple bookshelves in SharePoint sites. So other important concepts to know is views and metadata. When it comes to metadata, SharePoint is very flexible. In libraries and sites, you can set up any metadata you like. For example, in this on this screen, you can see a supply contracts library where I'm collecting contracts. So for contracts, I might want to collect information like supply name or end date or review date for the contracts. I might also collect information like status of the contract, whether it's active or inactive. So for each library, for each site, we can design our own custom metadata. And then based on this custom metadata, we can design different views or different ways of viewing our information. Like when you have a look at the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that I've got views for all contracts, where I can see everything I've gotten here on this bookshelf, or I can see only my active contracts. So if I will switch to active contracts view, all contracts with inactive status will disappear and I will see only my active contracts. So views and metadata are very helpful in SharePoint for tagging content and for displaying content in lots of different ways that make sense to the business. Now, SharePoint was around for a long time. It's more than 20 years old. But for most of the time, we had SharePoint on premises that was installed on a server that is managed by our organization. That's no longer the case. Most people now move to SharePoint Online, which sits in the cloud, either in Australia, or now we've got data center in New Zealand, so it could sit in New Zealand cloud. And it's managed by Microsoft. So what does that mean to us? There are quite a lot of differences when it comes to systems on premises and systems in the cloud. SharePoint Online is an evergreen environment because it sits in the cloud where it's continuously been maintained by Microsoft. So it's always up to date. It lowers our maintenance and effort costs because a lot of things that we used to do in the past, like patching the server and fixing things, now Microsoft is doing it for all of us in their data center. We don't need to look after the infrastructure. It's all done by Microsoft. We just consume the system. In the same way we consume our Gmail emails. We don't need to worry about where it sits and we just are using it. We get quicker access to new features because they are rolled out incrementally by Microsoft all the time. And less interruptions due to major changes. Like, as you know, with olden day systems like TRIMS or OpenText, every 3 to 5 years, we needed to go through a huge upgrade cycle where we needed to upgrade to a new version. We needed to migrate documents from the old version into new. So it was quite a big disruption for our organizations. We don't need to do it with Microsoft 365. But one word of warning, that means that this house will stay with you for a long, long time. If in the past we could tidy up our houses during the upgrades, it's like moving a house in your physical environment. Every time you move house, you can tidy it up, improve, get rid of clutter and so on. Well, now you have that house for a long, long time and you're not going to move very quickly from it. So you need to do all the incremental tidying ups and maintenance as you go to keep this house tidy. Another important reason why people are moving to SharePoint Online is decrease in cybersecurity risks. And budgets are predictable as they're based on the licensing model, which is based on the number of users. So are there really important considerations when it comes to SharePoint Online architecture? In SharePoint on premises, we had a very rigid house, similar to our traditional EDRMS, where we had a nested structure. We had something at the top, then we had levels underneath, and like we had sites, subsites, libraries. So it was like a multi-story house that was quite rigid in the way it's connected, because once you build a house with 10 floors, you can't easily unclip them and rearrange them in a different way. So SharePoint Online is quite different. Every single site or every single room, they are like planets in a space, independent. So think about like on a camping ground, you have different tents. And then it doesn't mean that there is a complete chaos. You can still connect those planets into a logical constructs using soft associations. So you can say, I want my sites number 1, 2, 3, 4 be part of the intranet family. And you connect them to the intranet hub. So once you connect them to the intranet family, they will get the same feel and look as all other sites in that family. So they will get the same colors, they will get the same navigation across all of them, and they will get a search. So it means that if I will come to the main hub site, main intranet landing page, if I will do a search, my search will search across all associated sites. The same concept applies to our document management systems. Typically, we connect sites and document management systems by function, where we can connect all sites related to a particular function together. And then you can search from the top across the whole function, or you can go to a particular site and search within this subfunction only. And you can give them the same feel and look. So from user perspective, they look like part of the same family. But the benefits of this flat architecture is that if something changes in your organization and you need to reshuffle all of these sites and connect them to families in different way, you can still do that because the associations between the sites are very soft. So you can change association from one hub to another very easily. You don't need to break the whole house for that. And that's a big strength of that environment, because as we probably have noticed in our organizations, things change all the time. And in fact, if you look at the rate of change over the last 100 years, it's speeding up more and more with every year. Our organizational structure change, the way we operate changes, everything around us in our organization changes. So it's good to be a bit flexible with our architecture to be able to adapt to the change quickly. And I just wanted to show you a screen grabs of how document management system can look with SharePoint sites. You've got navigation at the top, so people don't even really need to know which of these things in the navigation are sites, which are libraries, and so on. From their perspective, they see a cohesive system, cohesive navigation that takes them to the functions and subfunctions they need. And I mentioned to you that once you connect sites into hubs, that builds your search scope. And that's what you can see on the screen grab on the right. So here I went to our people area, and I started doing a search there. I couldn't find what I wanted, but what I can do from here, I can see that our people area sits under corporate management, and corporate management sits under the organizational document management system, ECR. So if I couldn't find anything in our people area, I can click on corporate management to expand my search to the corporate management hub that our people site is a member of. If I could not find anything under the corporate management, I can further expand my search to search across the whole document management system, ECR. And if I could not find whatever I'm looking There, I can expand my search to the whole SharePoint environment by clicking Organization tab on the search breadcrumb at the top. And that will search absolutely everything in SharePoint that I have access permissions to access. So just a reminder that the search in Microsoft 365 is security trimmed. So that means that you can see only things that you are allowed to see. If you don't have permissions to access something, you won't see it in the search. And another thing I wanted to also mention that SharePoint and Microsoft Teams are working seamlessly together. So if you were using Microsoft Teams for collaboration, where you had your project team set up in there, think about it as a barbecue. Your social area, like your chat-based component that you can add to any SharePoint site. Teams do not exist without SharePoint because SharePoint is an underlying storage for all the document or all the content you've got in Teams. So you might have a barbecue area on the deck, but you still need to have a house that this deck will be attached to. So you can have a chat with people in your barbecue area, but whenever you pass somebody a document, that document will be stored on a bookshelf in your house. And another thing which is quite different in SharePoint Online from traditional DRMS and from SharePoint on premises, compliance and the way we are addressing compliance issues and the way we are configuring our Microsoft 365 and SharePoint content repositories for compliance is different. Because while certain things we can configure in SharePoint, like we can configure our business classification scheme, we can configure our metadata, lots of other things are sitting outside of SharePoint in a separate component called Microsoft Purview Compliance Center. And that's important because this compliance center, why it was taken out from SharePoint is because it provides compliant features across the whole Microsoft 365 environment, not just for SharePoint. Through Compliance Center, for example, you can set up policies for chats and Teams, for emails that are stored in your Exchange Online. And that's where you will also find a unified audit log for everything in your Microsoft 365 environment, log that will allow you to see who's done what and when. So now we'll dive into lifecycle management and records management features. So in Microsoft 365, they are addressed in two levels. First of all, we have Microsoft Purview Data Lifecycle Management. These retention policies that could be applied to the whole environment, to the whole system. So you can say retain all chats in Teams for 1 year. It means that if somebody even goes and deletes a chat in Team, it will disappear from the view, but it will be just a soft delete. It will still sit at the back end of the system if you need to restore it within that year. Or you can set all emails to be retained for 7 years, for example. And then again, the same rule applies. While users can delete it from the inbox, it will still sit behind the scene and will be available for e-discovery. So let's think about it as like a broad brush retention that allows you to retain all content in Teams, all content in Exchange, all content in SharePoint. While this broad brush approach provides us some security mechanism against unauthorized disposal, it's not granular enough from records management perspective when we need to set up our disposal authorities. And that's where we've got a different component in Microsoft Purview Compliance Center called records management component with retention labels. So we can set up in this center retention labels for different classes or subclasses of our disposal authority. We can assign different retention periods to each label. We can design different triggers. We can have a disposition review when once your retention period is over, somebody reviews all the documents that came up for disposition and decides what to do with them. Then they could be extended or they could be destroyed. And on the next slide, you will see how I set up GDAs as labels. So for each different type of records in GDA, I set up a specific label, and for each label, you can see you've got disposal duration, you've got action of what needs to happen after the retention period, and so on. And then once you've got your records label set up, you can go to SharePoint and you can start attaching them to your documents. Typically, they are attaching labels at the library level. And then from that library, it cascades to every single document within the library or within the bookshelf. And then you can change it on a specific document if needed. So if Michael just clicks to play this video, you will see the whole end-to-end process on this video. It looks like Zoom is playing tricks for us. It did a good job with zooming, but it doesn't like to play. Yeah, it's playing now. So as you can see, I'm going here to library settings, and in library settings, I can apply retention label to all content in this library. So I applied a label to retain everything for 7 years. Now I push this label to be applied to all content within my library. So now if I go to a particular document, you will see this retention label was applied. But say I've got some exceptions within this library that need a different retention period. I can just select this document and go and change this label to another label. I can also do it in bulk for multiple documents. I can change the retention label for them. And then different rules will apply for the retention of those specific documents. So as you can see, it's all quite easy, but now I will hand over to Michael and he will compare what you saw today with our traditional EDRMS, and he will talk about pros and cons of different approaches. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Irina. Yeah, so I just want to really emphasize a bunch of the different things that Irina's demonstrated in terms of functionality and think about how those are different from what we call an electronic document and records management system. So the electronic document and records management system, it's in the name, it came from a records management discipline. SharePoint did not, and SharePoint does all kinds of things that we've seen in terms of managing records, but it does work differently. So there's a bunch of just possibilities to think about here. So Irina talked about those 2 levels that you have in terms of what you can do inside of Purview. So as she said, you know, there are these things that are easy to do, which I put on the slide there in terms of kind of broad brush rules that manage sets of information anywhere in Microsoft 365. So it's actually not just in SharePoint, but for example, as I've got there on the screen, it could be about email. You know, it could be about managing email in place. It could be about the opposite of what we would normally talk about when we're talking about managing retention and disposal, which is you might actually want to auto delete in some places. And that can be really valuable to drive home a message of where key information needs to go. If I know that I can't save things into my OneDrive because they get deleted the next day, well, that's going to drive me to save things where they will be kept. And that's a really extreme example and not one I would recommend in real life, but I put it there just for the sake of, you know, something to think about. So on the flip side, down in the detail and what Irina showed in terms of applying labels to different documents and things, that can be complicated for a few different reasons. And it's a really big topic, but I guess I just want to note that that is an area where people who are trying to manage records in place in 365 often have to invest effort to to solve for some of these gaps. So the first thing is by default, when I'm applying a label to something and I'm saying keep this for 7 years from when it was last modified, as an example, the default behavior is that each document's going to come up for review, if that's the action you've chosen, based on that specific document's metadata. And for those of us coming from a records perspective, we often want to manage a whole group of documents for the same period of time. Like this is an employee file. I'm not going to delete the oldest things off the employee file. I'm going to keep the whole thing. And there are things we can do about that, but just noting that's one of the things that, you know, requires some thinking. The second point there, Irina demonstrated being able to go and edit a retention label and change it. It's really flexible. However, it is true that by default, an end user can go and make that change if they can change the document. So they could go, haha, just kidding. We don't need to keep this for, transfer to Archives New Zealand. Instead, we can delete it tomorrow. You know, that is technically possible. So it's something that needs to be explored. The last point, and for me, probably the most minor, if I'm going to be blunt, is that out of the box, what metadata is retained about what was disposed of, if you actually get to that point, it does not meet the compliance minimum metadata in terms of what Archives New Zealand has stated you need to retain about what you destroyed. And I guess the thing that I would always say about this is, for most people I work with, talk to, the challenge about disposal is not actually about the technology. The challenge about disposal is around your organization, the processes you have, the confidence to actually identify and dispose of things. And so I guess I would never want to overcook the thinking about the technology. I think, for me, it's much more about the overarching system of an organization. Yeah. So that's one angle. Another thing to think about is, yeah, we've got the tents that just sort of sitting there. We can rearrange them. We can hook them into each other. We can, using this hubs concept, so we can link them up. So from an end user's perspective, it's great for my usability of the system. I've got this common navigation. I've got a common look and feel. It's great from findability perspective. I can search across, the sites that are connected to a hub, but it has no bearing on the controls related to retention and disposal. I can't say all of the sites connected to this hub should have a default label of such and such. I have to go and make those decisions site by site. And so that's a different way to think about, well, if I'm used to this idea that there's a sort of a hierarchy of things, and I want to know what function this belongs to because I want to put some base rule on the function, then activities below that, we don't have a hierarchy that drives management as opposed to a hierarchy that is of use to our users, to normal humans trying to work with the system. So it raises these questions, and typically they're solved through thinking about metadata and hierarchical metadata as much as they're solved through thinking about the groupings that you see in the front end. So another massive topic, but an important thing to consider. Then my experience with a document management system is that I can go and I can browse that hierarchy. I can normally see something that looks like a folder tree on my screen, and I can start at the top and I can browse down. Out of the box, SharePoint doesn't have that at all. So what I'm showing here is what they call the SharePoint start screen. It provides amazing, very useful functionality. It shows me things that I've tagged that I want to follow. It shows me sites I've visited recently. I can have all of organization featured links down the bottom left. But there is nowhere in the system that I can say, show me all the sites that there are. So out of the box, that is not a thing that SharePoint delivers. It doesn't mean it's not possible to do this stuff, but it's just saying it's not how Microsoft thinks people want to work. And so it is a real difference and a mindset shift to think, but where are all the things? And so from a flexibility perspective, I would say that in an EDRMS, you're driven towards particular ways that information is presented to people. And so you're driven towards kind of one context for the information. And we think of that as just sort of this hierarchy or folder tree. I'm talking in really general terms. That's not always true, but basically. And what I've seen in SharePoint is there's these fantastic opportunities to design basically and present information, and sometimes these get thought of as intranet functions. SharePoint can be and is often used for intranet sites. So, how do people see information about sort of who we are and what we do as an organization? But you can use all of those same features to make it easier for people to get to documents and other types of information that they need. And so I guess what I'm wanting to point you to is the fact that from a design perspective, you do have to invest that effort because there is no front door without that effort. However, you've got all this flexibility in terms of how you solve the problem and what it is that you show to people. So the other thing I would then point out in terms of the flexibility and the opportunities there, what I'm showing here is one example from Microsoft's collateral of what they call their modern collaboration architecture. Don't worry, there's a link on the next slide. You can go and look at that in your own time. But here's what they're saying at an organization level you could be doing with Microsoft 365, the kind of business activity or function that you're trying to solve, and the little icons are saying these are the things you can use from Microsoft's tool set to solve those problems. Not all of these are actually out of the box, default Microsoft 365 things, but many of them are. And why I chose this example and wanted to put this up is because you've got this one thing on here. It says Enterprise Document Store, and it's got a little SharePoint icon. And that's the normal scope when we're talking about needy RMS. And so I think the opportunity for those of us working in information and records is to actually say, cool, we are going to think broader. Not only are we going to think broader, but we're actually going to hopefully influence and get access to that much broader tool set so that we can actually think about governing information across the organization, because suddenly there's a greater shift to we're going to put more stuff into the one system, Microsoft 365. And if we as information professionals can influence that, then basically, it's a great opportunity for us. So that's that one little bit that's described as the EDRMS. And just very conscious of time, this slide is one for your future reference. Just wanted to point you to some other things that you can go and look at. So there are great public blogs and sites. SharePoint Mavens, just more generally about SharePoint. How could I link things up? Lots and lots of practical advice. Joanne Klein from Canada is a compliance expert. She's very focused on what are those tool sets in Purview and associated features in 365 that can help you to do things. So she's already solved some of those questions I've been raising on previous slides, like how do I retain all of the things for an employee file and for one period. There is a Wellington Microsoft 365 meetup, and they do often share things online as well. So for those of you who are not in Wellington, that's another access. We've mentioned about reciprocal agreements between ARANZ and RIMPA. There is a RIMPA community hub that you can join. You can ask questions, an online forum essentially, and then linking you to the adoption site, which contains the modern collaboration architecture. It's also got a big searchable 365 roadmap. In terms of that evergreen solution, you can stay on top of what's actually coming down the pipe there, and it's a public resource you can search and filter. And I think Microsoft have got a lot better at advertising these things in advance rather than just being like, surprise, it's a Thursday, you're going to get a new thing. Yeah. And finally, you can always go and talk to Microsoft. They have customer success managers. They have people who are supposed to help you make this stuff work. So that's the last thing I would recommend as a resource. Nice. So that's the end of our organized content, actually. So we zoomed through all that. Interested if people have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. We went much faster than I thought we would.
While we are waiting for questions to come through, I posted in a chat that if you could not go to the New Zealand Digital Workplace Conference this year, there's the conference that takes place every year, typically either in Auckland or Christchurch. If you could not go there, the Wellington Microsoft 365 meetup group that I'm one of the co-organizers of, this group will have a free online session that covers all the conference highlights. That's a great way of learning what was there without spending money and without traveling anywhere. So definitely recommend to attend this session.
Nice one. Yeah, I've attended 365 meetups and they're a good time, I think. It's one of those scenarios where not all of the people come from an information management perspective, and certainly not from a narrow records management perspective. And so that's really, really interesting and helpful.
And don't be scared, these meetups are not, some of them are technical, but most of them are not. Most of them are really from business perspective, and they dive in different aspects of Microsoft 365. Quite often they also have change management professionals, and sometimes we invite people to come to present third-party products. For example, we covered today some limitations in Microsoft 365. There is a bunch of vendors out there who develop third-party products to enhance certain capabilities of Microsoft 365. For example, there are product products that enhance the ability of creating sites from templates. They are called governance tools. There are also tools that enhance records management capabilities and allow to manage not only digital records, but also to manage paper records via the same interface. So with our meetup group, we also invite vendors, typically multiple vendors, to present tools that they've got. So we are not endorsing any particular product or any particular vendor. We are trying to just bring you a selection of different tools for you to compare and decide which ones you like the most.
Nice. We've certainly got a bunch of questions coming in now, so we'll do our best to navigate all of this. So Sean asks about revisions to standards with regards to minimum metadata requirements, and basically points out that people are going ahead with 365, even if there is a lack in terms of compliance. I guess, I mean, we can't speak for Archives New Zealand. I haven't heard anything about those kinds of changes to standards, but I would come back to the fact that, you know, compliance with the Public Records Act is about an organization. It's not about a technology. And there are things that, you know, make it harder about any technology, including SharePoint, to comply. But it's about the organization solving for that. And honestly, my genuine perspective on that is I've seen so many organizations with a lovely compliant, humming EDRMS, but actually, A, it doesn't have most of the information that matters to that organization, and B, they're not disposing anyway. And typically it comes down to business problems. It's people, it's policy, it's process, more than technology. That's my perspective.
That's a really good point, Michael. To expand on that, if you look at all organizations, we did not have even a single organization that would be fully compliant with Public Records Act in terms of every single requirement. Because if you look at the requirements, they are quite broadly worded. First requirement was to capture records of business transactions, no matter of the format and no matter of the system that they are stored. Were we always able to capture 100% every single thing that our users create? Think about, say, users saving things on the local drive, users saving things outside of our EDRMS. We were never able to 100% capture absolutely everything. So when it comes to minimum metadata requirements, so the things that Microsoft 365 does not capture with the out-of-the-box component is unique ID of the number. So it captures the unique ID against the document, but it does not capture it in the disposition report at the end of the disposal process. And it does not capture things like the date when the document was created. Now, with things like that, there are tools. You can either get a third-party tool that will capture all the metadata that you need to be fully compliant, or Microsoft 365 a couple of years ago added a component inside. So it pretty much allowed its workflow tool PowerAutomate to work with disposition process. And it allowed organization to design their own workflows that would do disposition in a way that works for the organization. And the way they've done that is, the reasoning behind was that Microsoft 365 is the system that is used all over the globe. And every single country has their own requirements when it comes to record keeping. So instead of trying to incorporate all of these requirements and start stretching the system in lots of different ways, it gave us tools to build what we need in our particular country, in our particular area.
Excellent. Yeah, for sure. Things are coming thick and fast now. I would say that there's some questions here that Evan's raised and others have echoed around public access to information. It's true that the Microsoft products like SharePoint, you used to be able to do public websites with it. You cannot do that now. So yes, you need to solve separately how you would present that information, in terms of like a key aspect of compliance is actually access, right? It's not just that you retain the thing, but people can get to it that. So there needs to be a separate approach in terms of how is it that we provide that access, unless it's just that you invite people to come and click on SharePoint in your office. There's also a question there around the idea of managing archives, things that are currently in Excel, and a suggestion that possibly lists is a feature to look at. I'd echo that. I've found that lists are very useful. We didn't touch on them in our presentation, but yeah, if you look into lists, so Microsoft lists or SharePoint lists, it essentially provides you with a view that is like a spreadsheet in your browser. And from there, we can attach a data entry form to get really high quality data. And you can drive the features, the views, sorting, filters, lists, grouping by any metadata column in that list. You can attach images to that list. So it may be a useful thing in the context of asset management. And you can also use that to trigger workflows to when something changes in that list, like on an item, then push a notification to a Teams channel or something like that. So lists can be really valuable where you want a kind of a high level of interactivity with the content, as opposed to like Excel's obviously really good if you're a finance person and you want to crunch numbers, you wouldn't be doing that in the list. Yeah.
And just a couple of also questions with regard to managing images for people who don't have DEMS. Now, when you think about Microsoft 365, there is a very different conceptual difference between like what we were using in the past and now. So in the past, we had lots of designated systems for different things. Like we had a DRMS for records management. We had content management systems for intranet management. We had DEMS for image management. And we had millions of systems who were focusing just on one thing. So now with Microsoft 365 is a multi-tool. It can deliver lots of things, but it has capabilities, and then you need to utilize these capabilities to build a specific solution. So you can use Microsoft 365 to develop really good intranets, and most intranets these days are developed in Microsoft 365 environment. So you can use this toolset to deliver a specific solution. You can deliver EDRMS in a Microsoft 365. So you use this tool, but you need to configure, you need to set it up, you need to set up metadata. And then you can design your solution the way that works for you. The same with images. So you can use SharePoint for storing images. And then for images, you can set up different metadata like in DEMS that allow you to capture copyright information, that allow you to capture status active or inactive, whether it can purposes for it, which it could be used. It allows you can set up metadata to capture specific image related things, like whether it's portrait or landscape, what topics this image relates to. So you can make it quite similar to DEMS, but you need to make it. It won't come like a complete DEMS system where you just open the box and plug it in and it's working for you like that. You have capability that you can use to design something that will provide similar kind of functionality.
For sure. One thing I would add that we haven't mentioned really, but we're talking here about how do we manage information over time and talking about that scope and the kind of multi tool. I guess one challenge or one thing that deserves effort basically is to think about, well, what does it mean if I'm asking someone to do everything in one place? Like, welcome to your new home. You can work here. We've got your shelving in for you. But there is the risk there that basically I'm going to put absolute dross for things that I care about, but just now, my workings, my etchings, my thinking about something right next to something that needs to be retained forever. And it's driving up capture rates in the sense that we don't sort of ask people to sort of switch mindset from this is what's on my desktop versus this is what's in the EDRMS. But there's some things to work through there that in terms of the implications. Like, well, so what? Like, does it matter that we've got a bunch of sort of low level stuff next to things that are high level? Do we want to create different shelves for those things? Do we want to automate this? Do we want to look at reporting in the back end, searching? Yeah. I just want to emphasize that that's one of the kind of mindset shifts when we're thinking about that management and that move, because we're thinking about a bigger scope. We've got these great opportunities, and effort, you know, it requires effort, basically. It requires effort to tackle that bigger scope. Yeah.
There are some really interesting discussions in the chat with regards to document transfer to Archives New Zealand. Actually, I was talking to Archives New Zealand people a couple of years ago about different ways of achieving that. Well, Archives New Zealand and DIA, they have their own Microsoft 365 tenant. And one way of records transfer that they were investigating with Microsoft is transfer actually doesn't need to be physical. Transfer could be a transfer of authority. So physically documents, for example, can continue sitting in your environment, but it could be transferred to Archives New Zealand, managing certain portion of your environment, things like that. Or they were also looking at other ways of automating or making it easier to transfer documents between the tenants. Like arguably, it could be much easier to transfer documents from one Microsoft 365 tenant to another than say from from different systems, completely different systems. Unfortunately, I don't think that there was much progress with in Archives New Zealand in terms of enabling digital transfer of records. And and as you know, in our current environment, with lots of cuts in different public sector agencies, I don't think we can expect any kind of developments in this area anytime soon, which is unfortunate. But I'm also keeping an eye on what's happening overseas in Australia and in other countries to see what pathway they are taking forward. For example, in Australia, they records management authorities and the federal government provide some really good advice and tooling for agencies to set up their Microsoft 365 environment in a consistent way, which is really nice. So they have, for example, a blueprint of compliance configuration. So you can just download this blueprint and configure your environment, all the tick boxes in exactly the recommended way. It just saves time and money, and then each individual agency do not need to reinvent the wheel. So that's the pleasure of having the same environment in multiple public sector agencies. And another good question was about seeing SharePoint Microsoft 365's roles and responsibilities. That's a really good question, and we are still struggling as a profession to explain to people that Microsoft 365 Admin Center is no longer just IT playground. It has tools for all of us. It has tools for IM teams. It has tools for communications teams. It has tools for internal integrity teams and HR teams. And their models, the way that Microsoft designed the model, that there are lots of different technical roles in the environment that could be given to different people so that they could do just one little bit. So typically the approach is that global administrator is the role that can do absolutely everything in administration center. This role is restricted to just 2-3 people. But then a granular permissions can be given to different teams depending on what they need access to. For example, internal integrity team might need access to e-discovery models so that they could do e-discovery across emails, across OneDrives, across all document repositories to find something for a particular investigation. But only they need to have access to these tools, nobody else need, and they need to have specific use cases for using those tools. For example, HR teams might want to have access to communication compliance to get notifications when somebody is using Teams for inappropriate communication so that they could address this. Information management teams would need access to records management tools in Microsoft Preview Compliance Center. We also want to be involved in the discussion on sensitivity labels that we could apply for security classification of all the documents across Microsoft 365. So in some organizations are much more mature, and now you will see there that they've got a platform team that manages all the whole Microsoft 365 platform from the platform perspective, just to enable all these capabilities, just pretty much to make sure that the lights are on. And then they have product teams to manage specific products. For example, intranet team, comms team would manage the intranet, information management team would manage document management system and so on. And then they have also people assigned roles to manage specific aspects of security or compliance. Other organizations are less mature, and typically in those organizations, IT keeps everything to themselves. That's not a sustainable model, because typically IT people can't know everything. Like, they wouldn't know what records management component is, and they wouldn't be using it.
No, and I think a thing that I often think about is, for instance, like, you're not going to ask IT to manage the constructs inside an HR system. Like, what is the org chart? Like, you're not going to do that. You're not going to ask your IT people to look after the chart of accounts inside your finance system. It's right that the line of business that is responsible for that stuff can look after that stuff. And for those of us working with information and records, that means we use the tools that Microsoft's giving us to do that thing, not IT. And often I've found that, I mean, it does depend on the culture of the organization, but a bunch of organizations, IT is stoked to hand that over to someone else. It does depend, yeah. Conscious of the time, we won't be able to get to every question that's there. There's some questions about future webinar topics. We'll definitely, chuck anything in the chat about the future, and we'll definitely take that away to think about. There's one specific thing that I thought probably was worth mentioning. There's a question around use of AI tooling in any of the third-party products to drive retention and disposal. Yeah, I have seen that, and I think all of the products that have point on the end will do it. They all have offerings. So what I'm talking about there, common ones, there's Record Point, there's Av Point, and there's Castle Point, 3 different systems that are in implementations in New Zealand, which all support compliance or governance related functionality, and they all say that yes, we do some AI related things. Yeah. I think for now we might have to jump ahead and just sort of wrap it up, just to make sure that people can get away on time. So I guess just wanted to close out by saying, the intention of today, well, no, sorry, I'll talk about what's on the slide first. We are going to run webinars every month. We have gathered up already what those topics might be based on the initial survey that we did, but we'd love to hear more if you're interested in, other topics or, deep dives on any of this. We're going to do it on the last Friday of every month, except that's, what is it this month coming? I think it's Anzac Day, or otherwise it's Good Friday. But regardless, we're not going to do it on the last Friday of April. So we're going to have to squeeze one in and basically bookend May. We're going to do one at the start of May, and then last Friday of every month. So last Friday of May. And if you want to know more, obviously go check that out. If you want to keep in touch, then we are going to lean towards giving members a little bit more access in terms of seeing our newsletter, sharing links in there to future recordings and so forth. But for today's session, we're providing that, we're going to make the recording public and available to all. What I did also mean to say is I just wanted to emphasize the purpose of this session really was to give you that broad brush sort of overview of some of the things to think about with regards to managing information, so in 365 and SharePoint, so that you can take that away and dig into the bits that are relevant for your context. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and we will see you all again in some sense, different speaker, for the next webinar in a month's time. Thank you.